Honor and shame. Today we'll have a peek into the honor-shame concept as it functions in the Bible as well as in the Middle East. Some of us can still remember the good old cowboy stories and movies of John Wayne. When someone's honor was at stake in a saloon, there was only one way to settle the business once and for all. The two would end up in a street with revolvers in a standoff. The one who could shoot the fastest or the most accurate would be the winner. Sometimes the conflict was solved in a saloon with a fist fight, with plenty of tables and chairs and bottles broken in the process. People had been quite touchy in those days when their honor or name was at stake. Some of us can still remember our own fist fights at school to save your sister or friend's honor after someone made some rude remarks about them. You were even willing to endure a black eye for the sake of restored honor. Usually, you did not consider the consequences of your actions, because honor was more important. Even if you get punished afterwards with six of the best, leaving an uneven tattoo on your seat of learning, it was still worth it. Over the years, many movies were made about honor and how to be recognized as an honorable person, like in Men of Honor. Hollywood expanded the romantic side of honor, making even war an honorable adventure, fighting for your country, for glory, and for honor. The ability to keep your word, doing what you said you would, is also seen as a case of honor. Are you someone whose word is as good as his honor? In war, you can accumulate plenty of medals for your heroic efforts. To be recognized as a candidate for a medal is also seen as a great honor. Our teenagers are familiar with a computer game named Medal of Honor, where you can outwit the baddies while saving your country's honor. As a rite of passage, many teenagers had to pass a test for their maturity by hunting their first buck. For some cultures, it's a case of hunting a gemsbok with a spear. For some, it would be the hunting of a leopard with only a knife. Many of us can still remember that first hunt of a buck or a gazelle as a turning point in your life when you became a man, reaching a position of honor and recognition, especially among your friends at school. In the army, honor and respect are shown by saluting your superior officers. I don't think giving the general a high five would go down so well. In India, it is the custom among some of the tribes to shake their heads as a sign of respect and honor, a visual encouragement and announcement that you are seen as their superior. To do business with a shaking head is a sign that you are respected. Often we see riots in the Middle East when emotions flare up, when people feel the honor of their religion, or their prophet, or their faith is at stake. A few years ago, the Muhammad cartoons in Denmark caused a string of violent riots around the Muslim countries. When a Quran is burned in America, it would have violent reactions in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Egypt, where churches will be burned, people killed, and property damaged, all in an effort to restore the honor of their book. Sometimes we read in a newspaper of an honor killing, where a family member is killed for insulting the honor of the family. Usually it's a girl that is suspected of having an illicit affair with someone, or even if a boy or girl are seen alone in a room. To restore the family honor, blood is required, and usually the family take things into their own hands to settle the matter. Most of us grew up in a guilt-innocence culture in South Africa, where it was important to be proven innocent, where you try your best to obey the rules so that you are not found guilty. When we move to honor-shame culture like in the Emirates, a lot of things just doesn't make sense to us. We need to put on another pair of glasses to understand the culture. The Bible is written with a Middle Eastern culture as background, and it's easy to miss a couple of things when we read the Bible, just because we have the wrong cultural spectacles on. Albert Einstein once said, "Try not to become a man of success, but rather try to become a man of value." Honor is the value that persons have in their own eyes, or in the eyes of the public and community. It's all about the public nature of respect and reputation. Honor is letting someone know you see how valuable they are. There are two sources of honor: ascribed honor and achieved honor. Ascribed honor is the honor in the respect you inherit due to your family tree, your forefathers, your name, your titles, or your politics. Achieved honor is the respect you gain when you achieve something great, like winning in a competition, winning a war, or by playing the social games. It is like the honor an actor receives after giving his best performance. It might be a cup or a plaque or an object of art that would be displayed on the mantelpiece for years to come, where your achievements are visible to everyone. Or it's like climbing a mountain, reaching the highest point with great effort. You will experience a sense of satisfaction. I made it. I earned the view. I can pat myself on the shoulder with my victory. It would have been a matter of shame if I stopped 10 meters short of the top, too tired to continue, stumbling down the mountain again. Many people tried to conquer Mount Everest, but only few reached the top spot as a moment of glory. Many others failed for whatever reason and had to live with a sense of dishonor and shame for being so close and yet so far. Let's see how ascribed honor is mentioned in the Bible. In Matthew 1 verse 1. This is the list of the ancestors of Jesus Christ, the descendant of David, who was a descendant of Abram. Few of us today can boast with our family tree, because in the Western culture it is not so important. Some of us can barely remember the names of our grandparents, and even fewer those of the great-grandparents. Among the Arabs, it is very important to know your heritage, your family tree. People will respect you because of your name, your family, your line of ancestors. When Jesus was baptized in Matthew 3, then a voice said from heaven, "This is my own dear Son, with whom I am pleased." This is an achieved honor. Jesus achieved honor through his obedience to God. In Philippians 2 verse 8 it says, "He was humble and walked the path of obedience all the way to the death, his death on the cross. For this reason God raised him to the highest place above and gave him the name that is greater than any other name." Refugees fleeing for their lives might eventually arrive in a new country, but they lose their ascribed and achieved honor in the process. What is the impact of that upon their lives? Before, they might have been a respected person in their community, a person of honor and influence, but now they are demoted to a person of zero influence. When the Angolan refugees started arriving in Windhoek during the Angolan War many years ago, they had plenty of stories to tell. Some of them fled from Luanda by car, heavily laden with all their earthly possessions. Some of them left good jobs behind. One of the doctors we met fled with his family in his 2 cars. When they finally ran out of petrol, they had to abandon their cars and their possessions and started to walk with a few suitcases in hand. Eventually, those got too heavy and it was discarded too. When they finally reached the Namibian border many days later, they only had the clothes on their backs, desperately hungry and destitute. They had no documents, no future. In Windhoek, the desperate doctor searched for any kind of work, but he was unable to prove his medical background. Eventually, he found a job at a Coke factory, loading bottles of Coke onto lorries. He started at the bottom of the ladder once again to support his family in the slums of Katatura. He lost his status, his honor, and his influence in Luanda. No one in Windhoek was interested in his name or family tree or degrees he left behind. No one asked him what he accomplished in life. He lost everything due to the war and had to start all over again in a new country. What is your source of ascribed honor? Is it your family name or forefathers. Some of us could maybe boast that we have a family member who married the niece of an important minister. Or maybe we can boast about a great-grandfather who once had tea with General Herzog. Most of us can at least boast that we are at least descendants of Noah. What is your source of achieved honor? For these youngsters, it was a great moment of honor to appear next to their heroes, an event they might remember for life. For some of us, it might be an achievement on the sport field. Some of us can boast that we played for the Springboks, while some of us can boast that we at least watched them on TV. Some of us tried out for the Blue Bulls, while some of us would rather still try to conquer Red Bull. For some, it was the moment you received your degree, or the time when you stood first in your class, or when you got upgraded in your status in the army to be receiving a higher rank. The opposite of honor and respect is, of course, shame and rejection. In South Africa, we have an expression, ach, shame, that is used for moments of shock or sympathy, maybe on the same level as ach, sies toch. I don't think we have shame in mind when we use the word ach, shame. Like, isn't that little baboon in the tree so cute? Ach, shame. Many of our parents experience a sense of loss and dishonor when they retired. Everything they've built up over the years, they lost when they moved into the old age home. Suddenly they were surrounded by other old people who did not care what they had achieved in life, and nor do they care how important they were or how much influence or connections they had. Now they are just old and grumpy like everyone else. For some, it was the great loss of freedom. For some, the loss of bodily functions or health. For some, the loss of income or work or status. Every time when there was a conflict in the Bible, there was more at stake than just losing or winning. It was also a case of honor and shame. When David conquered Goliath, it was a great shame that rested upon the Philistines. How were they ever going to face the Israelites again if a little boy could whip their giant? They fled, not because the Israelites were so strong, but because they lost face, retreating in shame. When the Israelites lost a battle against the Philistines in the time of Eli, they not only lost the war, but also the Ark of the Covenant and their God. It was a great shame upon the nation and a great victory for the Philistines. One of the characteristics of an honor-shame culture, as it functions in the Middle East, is it's a game of push and shove. It contributes to the never-ending violence and conflict in most of the Middle Eastern countries. It's like a sword fight, where every advance needs to be deflected and counterbalanced by your own strike. Socially, it means having a quick answer ready when you are accused, or ridiculed, or criticized. You push me, I shove you. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Many of the riots we see today in many Middle Eastern countries is a testimony of the strong opinions based on cultural values. If your party or family is the ruling family, it would mean honor. If the opposition takes the throne, it would be a matter of shame. When the Brotherhood lost Morsi in Egypt, they reacted strongly to their lost honor by becoming violent and aggressive, all in an effort to regain a seat of honor. The more they made a mess of things, the more shame they accumulated. There are 4 steps in this social game of push and shove. Let's see how Jesus handled it in Matthew 12. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Jesus left that place and went to the synagogue where there was a man who had a paralyzed hand. Some people were there who wanted to accuse Jesus of doing wrong, so they asked him, "Is it against our law to heal on the Sabbath?" Jesus answered, "What if one of you has a sheep and it falls into a deep hole on the Sabbath? Will you not take hold of it and lift it out? And a human being is worth much more than a sheep. So then, our law does allow us to help someone on the Sabbath." Then he said to the man with the paralyzed hand, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out and it became well again, just like the other one. Then the Pharisees left and made plans to kill Jesus. The social codes of this game started with a certain claim or value statement. The Son of Man is Lord over the Sabbath. That was a shocker, because only God is the Lord of the Sabbath. So the claim or statement is brought into question by the Pharisees and rejected. The man with the paralyzed hand became cannon fodder in the hands of the religious gurus and was pushed into the game as a snare for Jesus. If he should heal the man, he would be guilty, because no one is allowed to work on a Sabbath. Then Jesus defended his claim by telling them a story. Who of you don't have a sheep that fell into a deep hole on the Sabbath and outlived it out? Is it lawful to do good on a Sabbath? People are more important than sheep. Jesus deflected their attack by one of his own. Public condemnation followed when success was assigned to one of the two groups. Jesus ordered the man to show his hand, and it was healed. Everyone knew that God would not listen to Sabbath breakers, and certainly would not listen to Jesus, who was claiming to be the Lord of the Sabbath. Great was their surprise when the man was healed. That means that God did listen to Jesus, and that Jesus found favor in God's eyes. It was like a slap in the face for the Pharisees. They fled the scene to save face and started making plans to get rid of him. The favor of the nation was with the winners, and they were amazed by what Jesus could do. As the honor of Jesus increased among the people, the honor and respect for the Pharisees were taking a nosedive. The Pharisees saw Jesus as a threat to their honor and existence, so they started to make plans to kill Jesus. The people's respect for them was going down, and they laughed them out of the house when Jesus put them in their place, calling them whitewashed graves, or criticized them with another story. Another aspect of the honor-shame culture is the idea of limited good. It is the faith that everything in the social, economical, and natural world, everything that is sought after, like land, wealth, respect, status, and influence, these things are only available in limited amounts, and is getting less and less. Many of the wars in Palestine are about the issues of land ownership that grows more tricky as the population increases. The years of fighting in Palestine for land and honor is still far from settled, and we will continue to see on BBC and CNN and Al Jazeera just how people are struggling for their rights and inheritance. There is only a limited amount of resources, and it should all be mine. The conflict, violence, and war seem to be never ending in the Old and New Testament and flourish even up to today. The cultural values of honor and shame causes generations of violence and aggression in an effort to regain respect and honor. The culture also dictates that you and your family will not be dishonored as long as you are not caught. It's okay to play in the flesh pots and brothels of Amsterdam, Bahrain, and Thailand as long as you are not caught. It's okay to crook in a test and to copy your friend's homework as long as you're not caught. But the slightest suspicion would cause shame, and then things will go downhill from there, as they violently try to demonstrate their honor. Honor killings to save the family honor is quite common in the Middle East, and one can read about it in many of the newspapers. It's not murder, it's a cultural effort to restore the honor and to get rid of the shame. One of the greatest dishonors is when a Muslim becomes a Christian. It is not only a shame and a mark against the family, but also against the whole religious congregation. The whole community would do their best to reconvert the person or ostracize him by getting rid of him in a timely fashion. Their honor is at stake when someone leaves their religion, and it brings shame upon them when the believer does not follow their beliefs anymore.
Abdu and his father, Suleiman, spend time praying and studying the Bible together. Some might call that a miracle, since the two did not speak for nearly 20 years. In fact, Suleiman's father once tried to kill him. Why? Because at the age of 16, Abdu decided to leave Islam and follow Jesus. The young man's journey of faith began with an unexpected visit.
I was sleeping and Jesus woke me up, and it was like a dream or revelation.
Abdu gave his life to Christ after reading from a borrowed Bible. His decision made his family angry because in their Muslim community, leaving Islam brings disgrace. Impressed by the changes in her son's life, Samira began to consider Christ. However, it took 10 years before she too would leave Islam to follow Jesus.
I believe that the faith of my son was true and correct, but now I have a big problem with my husband. But I decided to follow Jesus and try to bring my husband to Christ.
We showed big love to him and big changes in our character. This influenced him.
About a year later, Suleiman's heart softened under the influence of God's big love. Now he and the rest of his family, about 40 of them, are all Christians. This hut on the family property is now a place of worship to the Lord and for hearing the gospel.
Some countries like China uses public humiliation as a way to stamp out dishonor and shame from the community. These people got a block of wood around their necks with a poster pasted on it to explain their trespasses. For weeks they cannot feed themselves and are at the mercy of others to give them water or food. Nor could they wipe their noses or scratch their heads or wash themselves or sleep on a bed. It is public shaming at its worst. I wonder how such a system would work here, in the place of traffic fines. It seems that honor and influence is seen as a reward for obedience to God. Let's have a look at how it worked out in the life of Abram. The Lord said to Abram, "Leave your country, your relatives, and your father's home, and go to a land that I am going to show you. I will give you many descendants, and they will become a great nation. I will bless you and make your name famous, so that you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, but I will curse those who curse you, and through you I will bless all the nations." God promised Abram that if he leaves his honor and status behind in the land of Ur, he will receive new honor and status in the new country. I will make you a great nation. At this point of time, Abram did not have any sons, and no one who could carry forth his family name. Yet God promised Abram that he would have descendants as many as the stars in the sky. He would be a father of a great nation. God's promise of honor was unlimited and kept on growing bigger as the nation grew and expanded. I will bless you. It's an expression of God's favor over Abram. In an economy of honor and shame, the blessing and acceptance of God is seen as an enormous ascribed honor. To experience God's favor was something that most people could only wish for. But here Abram received it from God for his obedience. Today, many of the rituals of Islam are aiming to gain the favor of Allah, their God. The more good deeds they can do, the better the chances would be to gain his favor. That is why Ramadan is such a public event where people can be seen as they do good things or stick to the rules of the fasting. They are willing to suffer for their faith because just maybe they would gain Allah's favor. But no Muslim can ever tell you that he has arrived, that he had gained enough points in his efforts to qualify for favor. It remains a vague, unreachable dream no matter how many rituals you keep. I will make your name great, God promised Abram. It was God's promise that he would receive a public reputation of great honor. People will look up to him, and he will be known in the marketplace as a man of influence and status. Today we know too well the saying, "The efforts of many years can be destroyed in 1 minute." It's hard work to gain a reputation, and easy to lose it. I will bless you so that you can be a blessing. It was God's promise that he would be a man of substance. He would have resources that he could bless others with, and he would have enough to give away. He would be a person of great honor with the ability to bless. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. It was God's promise that he would give attention to the social and public dimensions of Abram's relationships. To receive a blessing is to receive honor. To receive a curse is to receive shame and dishonor. God promised Abram that he would not be shamed by his enemies. In you all the nations will be blessed. It was God's way of explaining to Abram that his honor will have far-reaching consequences. It would not be limited to his own family or tribe, but it will be bigger than his district or country. God promised Abram a global influence. He would be a man of influence, a man that would be known as favored by the Lord. Obedience is not something we have to do. It's something we get to do. Was it worth it to be obedient to God? You bet. Abram gained more than he lost as he moved away in obedience from his home country. Many of you are here today because God told you to come. You wrestled with him about a decision and finally got to the green light and command to move. You will reap the fruit of your obedience, and you will be honored by God himself. How does shame affect a person? In the world of the Roman Empire, the most honorable parts of the body was seen as the hands, the face, and the head. The most dishonorable part of the body was wrapped away in the sandals, your feet. In Psalm 118, David wrote that his enemies will become a footstool. The dishonorable feet would be seen as more important than the enemies, on whose heads you will trod as a public humiliation. Billy Graham once visited Jordan to visit King Hussein. The TV cameras was there to record the interview. Then Billy crossed his legs, pointing the sole of his foot towards the king. All the people gasped in horror, as this was the ultimate dishonor and shame upon their king. They missed Billy's message and only remembered his foot. It was a shame, even though he did not mean it that way. Jesus once told the story of the prodigal son to demonstrate the concept of shame and honor to his listeners. You can follow your own Bible translation from Luke 15, verse 11. Then he said, there was once a man who had 2 sons. The younger said to his father, Father, I want right now what's coming to me. So the father divided the property between them. It wasn't long before the younger son packed his bags and left for a distant country. There, undisciplined and dissipated, he wasted everything he had. After he had gone through all his money, there was a bad famine all through that country, and he began to hurt. He signed on with a citizen there who assigned him to his fields to slop the pigs. He was so hungry he would have eaten the corn cobs in the pig slop, but no one would give him any. That brought him to his senses. He said, all those farm hands working for my father sit down to 3 meals a day, and here I am starving to death. I'm going back to my father. I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son. Take me on as a hired hand. He got right up and went home to his father. When he was still a long way off, his father saw him. His heart pounding, he ran out, embraced him, and kissed him. The son started his speech. Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son ever again. But the father wasn't listening. He was calling to his servants, Quick, bring a clean set of clothes and dress him. Put a family ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then get a grain-fed heifer and roast it. We're going to feast. We're going to have a wonderful time. My son is here, given up for dead and now alive. Given up for lost and now found. And they began to have a wonderful time. This prodigal son dumped his whole family into shame with his unusual request. The early listeners heard one thing. The son wished his father was dead. He felt peanuts for him. He dragged his father's name through the mud, and the whole town was buzzing with this shameful news. The older brother was also ashamed, because he had to daily face the laughing town and hear their mocking gossip. That guy's brother is the shameless cookie who took his father's stuff, wasting it away in a far country. The shame would have followed the son to the far country where he lived a shameful life. Stories of his activities might have filtered back through the grapevine to feed the town's gossiping tongues. Have you heard what that boy did this time? The Turks would have shaken their hands, saying, Ayepya, shame on him. The prodigal son could have tried to spend some of his money to buy influence and honor by becoming the playboy of the town, buying friends who could support him in his adventures. His quest for honor soon ended in extreme poverty and hunger. It was a shameful thing to tend the pigs, the lowest possible job, reserved for slaves and foreigners, not for Jews. He was ashamed even in his misery. He lost face and was even willing to return to his father's house as a slave. He reached rock bottom. Lower he could not fall. He had no status, no honor, no influence. What was the father's reaction? The father saw him coming and ran to meet him. Those of you who lived for a while in the Middle East would have noticed that older men do not run. They slowly waddle or walk, but would never run. A man of status and advanced age would never run anywhere, but would act according to their status in society. Most likely the father never ran for the last 40 years of his life. No man over the age of 25 would dare to run. That's just the way it is. And yet the father ran. The long dresses and fashions of the men did not change much the last few thousand years and remained popular. If someone wanted to run, he had to pull up his dress and keep it up in one hand like a teenager. It's a humbling position to be in, because other people will then notice his knobbly knees and hairy legs. Until today, it's a shameful thing to do. You will never see men in shorts like us South Africans, for whom it is no big deal to wear shorts. It was already a big move forward to convince soccer players to use shorts instead of dresses. They probably decided it was a good idea after they lost too many games. The people of the village would have laughed at this returning prodigal son and would have rejected this outcast in his dirty clothes. But suddenly here came the father running by with his dress pulled up. Their mouths fell open. He drew attention like no prodigal son ever could. Everyone stared at this old man hobbling down the road like a strained camel with his hairy legs and knobbly knees. He humiliated himself in public, but he had to reach his son first. It was his love and care for the son that motivated him. He knew the town would not accept his son. He would be rejected and driven away. There was only one way, and that was to take the same upon himself and restore his son's honor by giving him a ring, a new suit and shoes for his feet, and a party of reconciliation. Jesus took our shame upon himself on a cross, the only way to restore our honor. In his public humiliation, he endured the mocking crowds, but he had a great plan in mind. Did you ever realize that God did not only save you from your sins and guilt, but also from your shame and dishonor? Thank you, Father, that you saved me from my shame and my dishonor by paying the ultimate price for me to set me free, to restore me back to a relationship with the Father. Thank you, Jesus, for bringing me home. Amen.